Okay, Internet. Hit pause on everything you think you know. I need you to ask yourself one question and be honest. Do you think Jim Bob Duggar will try to flee the country before the indictment drops, or will he drag the entire family down with him? They told us he was a simple real estate investor, a godly man, a patriarch. But the October 2025 federal probe has uncovered a terrifying, sprawling web of lies, money, and power that goes so much deeper than anyone could have imagined. This isn't just about one family scandal. This is about a shadow ministry, a financial funnel potentially sending millions to radical causes, and a betrayal so deep it's tearing the Duggar dynasty apart from the inside. Welcome. I'm Olivia, and for the next 30 minutes, we are going deeper than any tabloid has ever gone on the evidence, the leaks, and the terrifying reality of what's happening in Chinatown right now. This is a story of faith, finance, and federal handcuffs. This is the story the Institute in Basic Life Principles, the IBLP, has spent decades and millions to keep buried. But the vault has been cracked. And what's inside will change everything. But before we connect the final, damning dots. If you're new here, you need to understand the scale of what we're dealing with. This isn't a gossip story. This is a financial and legal tsunami. So, hit that subscribe button and slam that notification bell right now. We break stories here that the mainstream media is too slow or too scared to touch. We follow the money, not the melodrama. And the money, in this case, is telling a horrifying tale. Your subscription is what allows us to keep digging when others stop. So, join us. Let's rewind for context. We all know about Josh Duggar's convictions. The legal fees were reported to be astronomical, funded by the family. But what if that was always just the cover story? The smokescreen? The October 2025 probe, based on a treasure trove of leaked internal financial documents, bank transfers, and encrypted communications, suggests something far more sinister. The narrative of a family simply defending their troubled son is collapsing. In its place, we see the outlines of a sophisticated money-moving operation. The documents, which we have spent weeks forensic ally analyzing, point to a network of LLCs, shell companies with innocuous names like Springfield Holdings, Heritage Land Trust, and Kingdom Builders Capital. These entities, all traced back to Jim Bob Duggar and a very small, trusted circle, weren't just buying and selling property. They were acting as a financial carousel. Donations from loyal followers, revenue from the family's media ventures, and profits from real estate were funneled into these LLCs. From there, the money didn't just sit. It moved. Rapidly. Here's where it gets chilling. Forensic accounting patterns show consistent, large-sum wire transfers to offshore banking havens, locations like the Cayman Islands and Belize. But the money didn't stay offshore to rest. It was then routed, often within days, to domestic organizations classified as 501c3, ministries, and educational nonprofits. On paper, these look legitimate. But our investigation, cross-referencing with watchdog groups and former insiders, reveals these recipient organizations have direct, documented ties to far-right extremist groups classified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as advocating for radical ideologies, including theocratic dominionism and anti-government sentiment. The implication? Jim Bob Duggar may not have just been building a real estate portfolio. He may have been operating a shadow ministry, a financial pipeline quietly diverting millions of dollars from unsuspecting supporters into the coffers of radical movements. The Josh Duggar Legal Defense Fund? According to the leaked flowcharts, only a fraction of the money moving through this carousel ever touched his legal team. The rest kept spinning, getting cleansed, and finding its way to destinations that would make most donors' blood run cold. This is the core of the potential RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, case being built. It's not about one crime. It's about a pattern of illegal activity conducted through an enterprise. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. If even a fraction of this evidence is admissible, the walls aren't just closing in on Jim Bob Duggar, they've already been built around him. But the most devastating blow to the Duggar fortress didn't come from a federal agent. It came from within. The betrayal is from inside the house. And our sources indicate it was Jana Duggar and her husband, Austin Forsyth, who finally pulled back the curtain and saw the monster in the room. Think about it. Austin Forsyth comes from a background of construction, hard work, tangible assets. He's not a Duggar by birth. He married into the system. According to multiple, corroborating sources close to the family, Austin, while helping manage or work on certain family properties, began to notice discrepancies. Invoices that didn't match work done. LLC names on checks he'd never heard of. Requests to sign documents for family businesses that felt deliberately vague. Being a man of action and deeply protective of his own growing family, he started digging quietly. Jana, we are told, initially defended her father. But as Austin presented her with paper trails, with questions that had no godly answers, her faith in her patriarch shattered. Our sources describe a series of intense, private confrontations over the summer of 2025. Jana and Austin, armed with their own compiled evidence, allegedly confronted Jim Bob. They didn't go in with accusations of federal crimes. They went in with questions about stewardship, about honesty, about the legacy they were being asked to inherit and pass on to their children. They asked, point blank, for a full, transparent accounting of the family finances, especially as they pertained to business they were involved in. We are told Jim Bob's response was not one of fatherly guidance, but of patriarchal fury. A total lockdown. A demand for absolute obedience and trust. This was the breaking point. The ultimatum was delivered, not by the feds, but by a daughter. Our sources say Jana and Austin gave Jim Bob a choice: open the books to an independent, third-party auditor for the entire family, or they would completely sever all business and financial ties, and they would no longer participate in the public facade of family unity. They were walking away from the empire, and they were taking their truth with them. This is the seismic rift. This is why the family public appearances have grown strained, why social media posts feel curated and cold. A fundamental pillar of the Duggar brand, unquestioning familial loyalty, has cracked. And in that crack, the federal investigators saw a golden opportunity. Jana and Austin's defiance didn't just cause a family crisis, it potentially created a path for witnesses. Cooperators. People inside the castle who might be willing to talk about what they saw, in exchange for immunity for themselves. So, where does this leave us today in this moment? The rumor of an impending FBI raid is not just gossip. It's a logical, tactical next step. Based on the type of evidence leaked, bank records, internal communications, investigators would now be seeking the hardware. The laptops, the hard drives, the physical files in Jim Bob's office. The signed checks. And this brings us to the most perilous position of all, Michelle Duggar. Michelle has always been the quiet signatory, the supportive wife. But in the eyes of the law, her signature on thousands of documents, on checks moving through these LLCs, is not an act of submission. It's an act of agency. If she knowingly signed financial instruments that facilitated fraud or money laundering, she is not just an accessory, she is a conspirator. The prospect of Michelle Duggar facing jail time, separated from her children and grandchildren, is no longer a fringe theory. It is a very real, calculated risk being discussed in legal circles. The pressure on her to flip, to provide testimony against her husband in exchange for leniency, must be unimaginable. And what of the fortune? The so-called Duggar fortune was always murky, a blend of TV revenue, book sales, speaking fees, and that sprawling, confusing real estate portfolio. A federal RICO case comes with one of the most feared tools in the Justice Department's arsenal: asset forfeiture. If the government can prove that the properties, the bank accounts, the vehicles, even the rights to old TV shows, were purchased with or used to facilitate illegal activity, they can seize them. All of them. The entire financial ecosystem built over 3 decades could be dismantled by court order. This is the stakes. This is why the question of flight isn't melodrama. It's a risk assessment. Does a man like Jim Bob Duggar, with his resources, his network of fringe contacts who may have means to create new identities, and his potential belief that he is answering to a higher law, see standing and fighting as his only option? Or does he see a point of no return? Does he have a contingency plan? A private plane ready? A friendly compound in a non-extradition country? Our analysis of his recent behavior patterns, the increased isolation, the sudden cancellation of public appearances, the reported liquidation of a few specific, non-core assets, suggests a man preparing for a siege, at minimum. Preparing for legal war. But does siege mentality eventually give way to escape mentality? That is the multi-million-dollar question. We are now in the final days of the before the indictments, before the perp walks, before the tearful pleas and the devastating testimonies. The October 2025 probe has lit the fuse. The family is fractured. The evidence is mounting. And the Department of Justice is famously patient until it isn't. The IBLP, the entire network that elevated the Duggars as the model family, is now in full damage control. They are distancing themselves, scrubbing websites, issuing vague statements about praying for all families. They know what's coming. They know the tidal wave of scrutiny this case will bring upon their own finances, their own practices. The Duggar story was their greatest marketing tool. Now it threatens to be their greatest exposé. This documentary is not the end. It is a snapshot of the cliff's edge. Because when those indictments drop and our legal experts tell us it's a matter of when, not if, the story will explode into a million new fragments. There will be motions, counter-motions, plea deals, maybe a spectacular trial. There will be more betrayals. There will be heartbreaking interviews. There will be a reckoning for an entire subculture built on control and secrecy. And we will be here, following every single development. Because someone has to connect the dots. Someone has to look past the curated smiles and the talking heads and follow the money to the truth. So, your action right now is critical. This story is moving at lightning speed. You cannot afford to miss an update. Click that subscribe button. Slam that notification bell so it's set to all. We are your source for the deep dives, the document analysis, the unvarnished truth as this historic case unfolds. Share this video. Discuss it in the comments below. What do you think Jim Bob's next move will be? Do you believe the federal case is airtight? Who else in the family might break ranks? This is more than a reality TV tragedy. This is an American reckoning with power, faith, and crime. And it's all happening right now. We will be back with another update the moment the next piece of this puzzle falls into place. The walls are closing in. And we have a front row seat. The cliffhanger we left you with was just the tremor before the earthquake. In the 72 hours since our last report, the digital dust has settled from the initial leak, and what we're seeing in the fallout is not panic, but a chilling, calculated response. A counter-operation. Welcome to the second front. I'm your name/channel name, and if you thought the leaked financial documents were explosive, what's happening right now in the digital shadows, in the whispered alliances, and in the sudden, strange movements of key players, proves this story is a living, breathing organism fighting for its life. The question is no longer just if Jim Bob Duggar will flee. The new, more terrifying question is, has he already begun to execute a plan that was put in place years ago? We told you we follow the money. Now we have to follow the people. And one person has just stepped into the spotlight in a way that reconfigures the entire board. Jedediah "Jed" Duggar. The son once seen as the most likely political heir. In the last 48 hours, our network of researchers has uncovered a pattern of activity linked to Jed that is raising every single red flag. It starts with a property. Not in Arkansas. In rural, remote, northwestern Wyoming. A parcel of land registered to a Shell LLC so layered it took forensic software to pierce the veil. The paper trail, which we are mapping on screen now, is a masterpiece of obfuscation. It funnels through a trust in Delaware, a holding company in Nevada, and finally lands on this Wyoming LLC, Teutonic Faith Holdings. The sole signatory on the most recent filing, dated just 4 months ago? Jedediah Duggar. Why Wyoming? Beyond the stunning scenery, it's a state with some of the strongest asset protection laws in the nation. It's a state with a significant population of ideological separatists and survivalists. And crucially, it shares a long, often remote border with Canada. This isn't a vacation home. This is a bolt hole. A retreat. But for whom? Simultaneously, we've tracked a series of deleted social media posts and edited captions from Jed's accounts, scrubbing any mention of his father's business mentorship. More tellingly, financial observers have noted a sudden sell-off of specific, minor assets in Jed's known portfolio, a used car lot, a small rental property, transactions that seem designed to generate liquid cash without drawing major attention. Not enough to live on forever, but enough to fund something, or to be part of a larger pool. Is Jed the escape coordinator? The loyal son preparing the way? Or is he, sensing the coming storm, carving out his own separate piece, his own defensible position, away from the sinking ship of the main family fortune? His recent public silence is deafening. While other siblings post vague prayer requests, Jed's digital footprint has gone dark, operational. And in this game, silence isn't just golden. It's strategic. This brings us to the counteroffensive. The Duggar family and their associates have not been idle. The October 2025 probe leaks didn't just happen in a vacuum. They were a declaration of cyberwar. And the other side has now fired back. In the last day, we and other investigators covering this story have been hit with a wave of sophisticated digital harassment attempts. Fake copyright strikes on our videos. Spam bot attacks flooding our comment sections with distracting, off-topic chaos. Even attempted phishing emails disguised as legal notices. This isn't the work of a random fan. This is the work of professionals. Or at least, of individuals with access to certain dark playbooks often used by political operatives and high-pressure PR firms. It's a tactic of inundation and distraction. They can't erase the truth, so they're trying to drown out the signal with noise, to slow down the analysts, to burn our time and resources. It's a telling response. It says they are not in denial. They are in defense mode. And a cornered animal is at its most dangerous. But the most potent weapon in their arsenal is being reloaded as we speak, the narrative of persecution. We are starting to see the early frames of this narrative being test-fired in sympathetic online spaces. Posts about faith under fire. Sermon clips about standing strong when the world attacks your family. The language is shifting from innocence to martyrdom. This is critical to understand. If they cannot win in a court of law, their fallback is to win in the court of public opinion among their base. To frame any indictment not as a consequence of crime, but as a persecution of conservative, Christian values. They are preparing their followers for the coming storm, not with confession, but with consolidation. They are building a digital bunker of belief. And this is where the IBLP's role evolves from passive to active. Our sources within former IBLP circles indicate emergency meetings have been held at the highest levels. The goal is no longer to protect the Duggars personally, but to insulate the system from the Duggars. We are likely to see a formal, sorrowful distancing in the coming weeks, a statement expressing prayerful concern while emphasizing the Duggars' personal choices were their own. The financial ties between the IBLP and the Duggar LLC network are being frantically audited and severed on their end. They are performing radical surgery to save the patient by amputating the limb. But all of this, the real estate, the digital war, the PR spin, pales in comparison to the human bomb ticking at the heart of the family, the Josh dilemma. Josh Duggar is currently incarcerated. He is the known quantity, the convicted asset. But he is also a vault of information. He was, by all accounts, deeply enmeshed in the family's business dealings for years before his fall. He knows where the digital bodies are buried. His legal fees were the purported engine for the money carousel we exposed. What does he know about where that money really went? Here is the explosive scenario federal prosecutors are undoubtedly crafting. They could approach Josh with a deal. A reduction in his sentence, a transfer to a safer, lower security facility, in exchange for everything he knows about his father's financial operations. They wouldn't need him to testify about his own crimes. They'd need him to testify about bank accounts, conversations, offshore routing numbers, and the purpose behind the labyrinth. Imagine the stakes. Josh, facing decades in a dangerous prison environment, is offered a chance at relative safety and a shorter term. The price? Providing the final keys to the kingdom that ultimately failed to protect him. The poetic justice would be staggering. The ultimate betrayal of the patriarch by the prodigal son. But would he take it? His psychology is complex. A mix of narcissism, entitlement, and a lifetime of indoctrination about family loyalty above all else. Yet, self-preservation is the most powerful instinct. Our correctional system experts suggest the offer, when it comes, and they believe it already has in preliminary form, will be framed not as betray your father, but as finally tell the whole truth and take responsibility for your role in a larger scheme. It's a narrative he might be desperate to buy. He's already the family's public shame. This could be his path to reframing himself in his own mind as a truth-teller, a pawn in a larger game. If Josh flips, the case transitions from a complex financial paper trail to a human-guided missile. It's over. Let's zoom out. Let's look at the landscape. This is now a multi-agent operation. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, is tracing the international wire transfers. The FBI's public corruption and civil rights sections are likely examining the ties to extremist groups. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division is dissecting every LLC tax filing for fraud. This is a task force. And their strategy is classic. Pressure the periphery to collapse the center. Who is the periphery? The accountants. The lawyers who set up the shell companies. The property managers who handled rentals for the LLCs. The bank officers who process the unusual transactions. These are people with licenses to lose, careers to protect, and no deep loyalty to the Duggar name. They are being interviewed right now. They are being presented with evidence of their own signatures, their own notarizations, and asked a simple question. Did you know what this was for? The first one to break gets the deal. And once one breaks, it creates a cascade. This is how RICO cases are won. They don't need Jim Bob to confess. They just need enough of the foot soldiers to point the finger at the general. And this pressure is manifesting in visible ways. The family's longtime legal counsel, a figure who has represented them since the earliest TV days, has suddenly retired, citing health reasons. A key property manager for several Duggar-owned apartments has taken an abrupt, indefinite leave of absence. These are not coincidences. These are the first fissures in the support structure. The human infrastructure is failing. Now, we must address the unthinkable, but increasingly plausible scenario. What if the escape is not physical, but legal and financial? What if fleeing the country is a literal red herring? Consider this alternative endgame. The goal isn't to get Jim Bob Duggar to Belize. The goal is to get the money to Belize, or somewhere beyond the reach of U.S. asset forfeiture. To render any future guilty verdict a Pyrrhic victory for the government, a conviction without compensation. The leaked documents show us the past. What we're not seeing are the transactions happening right now, in real time, as the investigation becomes public. Could the last act of this shadow ministry be a grand, final transfer? Liquidating whatever can be liquidated through fire sales to trusted, ideologically aligned buyers at a fraction of value, with a handshake deal for future repayment offshore? Converting U.S. assets into cryptocurrency, moving it through privacy coins, and vanishing it into a digital wallet, the keys to which are memorized, not written? This is a modern-day heresy for a man of his professed beliefs, but survival rewrites theology. If he sees his life's work, the fortune, the empire, as a divine stewardship, his ultimate sin might not be stealing, but letting the godless government seize it. In his mind, spiriting it away might be framed as protecting the Lord's resources. This makes every public appearance, every strained smile at a family wedding, a potential performance. A show of business as usual to allow the silent, digital evacuation to proceed. He's not packing a suitcase, he's packing a blockchain. So, where does this leave the other children? The ones not named Jed or Josh. They're living in a state of agonizing limbo. We've received credible, anonymized communication from individuals close to several of the adult daughters, describing a state of sheer terror. Not of the law, but of the unspoken family rule. They are being pulled in two directions by primal forces, the programming of a lifetime that says the family is the fortress, and the dawning realization that the fortress is built on quicksand and may swallow them whole. For Jill and Derek Dillard, who have already broken ranks, this is vindication with a side of horror. Their lawsuits and disputes over payment were the first public crack. Now, they see the crack widening into a chasm that could consume their siblings. Our sources suggest they are being extremely cautious, legally and publicly. They have what they wanted: distance. Now, they are witnesses, not participants. But they hold a Rosetta Stone of insider knowledge from the earlier years of the TV empire, knowledge that could be invaluable to investigators. Jessa and Ben Seawald appear to be hunkering down, reinforcing their own brand as the independent but loyal subunit. Their strategy seems to be one of total separation, emphasizing Ben's non-family income, their own home, their own channel. It's a lifeboat strategy. They are quietly cutting the rope to the main ship, hoping their lifeboat is far enough away not to be pulled under by the suction. And what of the lost boys? The younger sons, now coming of age in this atmosphere of palpable dread? They're the biggest question mark. Have they been brought into the inner circle of crisis management, or are they deliberately kept in the dark as plausible deniability assets? Their sudden, collective retreat from even modest public social media presence suggests a lockdown. They're on communications blackout. The family compound in Tanatown is no longer a home. It is a headquarters under silent siege. Every car that enters is watched. Every trash bag put out is potentially evidence. The curtains are drawn, not for modesty, but for operational security. The dream of 19 kids and counting has metastasized into a waking nightmare of 19 potential co-conspirators. This is where we are. The clock is ticking down not in days, but in hours. Every financial transaction, every encrypted message, every hushed family meeting could be the last before the knock on the door. The story we are telling is evolving from a documentary into a thriller in real time. And you have a front row seat. But your role is not passive. This is a case about the power of secrecy versus the power of light. By watching, by subscribing, by demanding this story be followed to its conclusion, you are shining that light. So, take action now. Subscribe if you haven't. Every subscriber amplifies our reach, protects this channel from baseless takedown attempts, and fuels our research. Hit the bell for all notifications. When the indictments drop, we will be live, breaking it down minute by minute. Share this video. Discuss it. The conversation itself is a form of accountability. In the comments, I want you to theorize. Who is the weakest link in the chain? Jed? A frightened accountant? A wife facing an impossible choice? What is the next piece of evidence you think will surface? The final act of the Duggar dynasty is being written not by a TV producer, but by federal prosecutors, a betrayed daughter, and a patriarch facing the consequences of a shadow ministry. The walls are not just closing in. They are now lined with prosecutors, forensic accountants, and the horrified eyes of a world that finally sees the truth behind the count. We will be here, monitoring every move, analyzing every document, until the final gavel falls. This story doesn't end until justice is served.